Alrighty, y'all, we only got 4 chapters of JJK left, and 267 was insane, so today we're going to go over all of y'all's questions and theories. Spoilers beware. So first up today, we got this from Slick Rick, who says, in these next couple chapters, I don't think we're going to get Sukuna backstory, so my own little headcanon is going to be that it's similar to All for One. And you do bring up a good point about their similarities in the whole brothers in the womb thing, so yeah, for sure. And they're obviously both villains, but I do think Sukuna's like motivations and desires are pretty different from All for One's. I think he's really just, out to fulfill his own desires, which you could say All for One does too, but All for One wanted to like rule and subjugate people, and I don't know if Sukuna was really about that. He was just looking to fulfill himself and ease his boredom until his death. Next up, we got a couple of questions from B-Top here, and thank you for the kind words, man. But the first one deals with Rika potentially having eaten Sukuna's finger, which we now know isn't the case. But to address your question here, you were wondering if she had eaten Sukuna's finger, then why didn't they just feed all of Sukuna's fingers to Rika? Because then that seems like a much better vessel, considering there were no consequences to her. And I'm 100% with you. That was one of the things that made me most wrestle with the concept of Rika having eaten Sukuna's finger. It didn't really make sense. So now that we know she ate Yuji's, it all kind of comes together, right? And then your second question of, do I think we might be getting a JJK Shippuden or some sort of sequel? And man, I hope so. Like, I would love that. And even if it wasn't like a direct sequel, but a spin-off or a prequel or something of that nature, I would be here for it. But I just don't have like the highest hopes for that, just based on how Gege has like largely talked about it. I think he loves JJK, and it's not as if like he hates it or anything, but it does feel like he's ready to move on to something else. But you never know. I mean, especially if that paycheck's hitting, maybe we'll get the sequel, so we'll have to see. Next up, Ivan says, read Undead Unluck. And I have heard about this one a lot, but I actually know nothing about it. Like, if there's an anime, maybe we'll dive into that and have like a community watch party and see if like I like it. But yeah, I have a long list of things I need to check out. Next up, Joey Quiz shares his thoughts on Kenjaku's statement about how while Sukuna and Yuji are alive, the chain of curses will never end. He's saying that because Sukuna and Yuji represents kind of two sides of the same coin, like darkness and light, that is a necessary balance in the world. And just how we know that Gojo shifted the balance of the world and curses got stronger, if you only were to take out either Sukuna or Yuji, then the balance would be unbalanced at that point and it would need to fix itself. So if you only took out Sukuna and Yuji remained, then perhaps another quote unquote Sukuna would emerge to kind of fill that void. So that's why you have to take out both. And this is definitely an interesting analysis. And I do think like when you distill it down, that's kind of what's being said there, but there may be something else to it, like mechanically in universe, to where like in order to truly kill Sukuna, they're gonna have to get rid of Yuji and vice versa. Next up, we got this from Textbook Ninja, who is a YouTube member. Shout out, my friend, and also thank you for the kind words. But he wants to know, what are the chances we get more details on the Fujiwara Sugawara origins for Yuta before the end? And great question. With only 4 chapters left, I don't expect to get like a big info dump on those things, but I do largely expect something to happen with Yuta in Gojo's body, kind of just laying there on the ground. Like something more is going to happen with Yuta 100%. It's just a matter of if this kind of backstory gets dumped out or not, which we'll have to see. And then you also mentioned Gurren Lagann, and I just had to say that that's one of my favorite animes of all time. So maybe at some point it would be cool to do like a little retrospective or something on it. Next up, we've got this kind comment from Zagred, and y'all pause to read it, but he just is recommending Tower of God, which a lot of people have recently, but also says would be cool to see Kagurabachi, Sakamoto Days, Dandadan, and Boruto. And I will definitely be doing Kagurabachi, I've decided. I'm almost all back to caught up on that. Sakamoto Days I still plan to do, but at this point might wait for the anime and then kind of dive into it. And similar with Dandadan, I'm very excited for this, so I don't want to guarantee that I'll cover it, but probably as long as the anime doesn't disappoint. And then of course, One Piece is absolutely happening. But my friend, thank you so much for the support and the kind words. Next up, we got a few from Wonton. The first one being, have you ever considered covering Chainsaw Man? And honestly, not really, just because I haven't ever gotten into Chainsaw Man. It is on my list, my long list of things to check out, and I will admit it's not very high on that list, but I do plan on checking it out at some point, and if more people are interested in it, definitely let me know. But then, what character in JJK do you find the most relatable personality-wise? Honestly, I would say probably Kusakabe or Nanami. And then, are you willing to acknowledge the undeniable fact that Nobara has the most aura out of the main trio? That's tough, honestly. It's not Yuji, that much is for sure. But I think Megumi might edge her out in aura. I mean, you remember how he was treated at his high school and how in that jujutsu stroll that woman approached him? The man's got aura. And then, yes, truly, it is not Nobara over. Next up, we got this one from Nikki, who is also a YouTube member, so thank you so much, Nikki. And y'all pause to read this, but it deals with the whole only one will live or only one will die thing. And Nikki, I'm not sure if you saw it, but I did just put out a video on this, I think yesterday, so that has my full thoughts on all of this, but I do think there's still like 3 possibilities for what ending we could still see. Next up, Naxmax says, let's go. I knew Nobara wasn't a goner yet, and I could definitely see Angel hitting a Jacob's Ladder one more time on Sukuna if he does manage to escape from Yuji's domain. And I mean, yeah, we got a whole gang of cast around right now, so should Sukuna make it out of the domain, Yuji should have a lot of backup. But I'm very curious how this exactly is going to play out over the next 4 chapters, and I might make another video talking about like what just happened to Sukuna, so we'll see. Next, Yasser says, seeing as how many binding vows Yuta has on his copy technique, do I think that he could use another one, allowing him to use Kenjaku's body swap indefinitely in exchange for giving up all of his copy techniques and never copying another? And yeah, I do think that certainly binding vows like that are possible. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're definitely going to get something more with Yuta laying in Gojo's body right now. Plus, there was the whole even explicit mention of the fact that Kenjaku had some sort of binding vow or way to get around curse technique burnout after using a domain. So something is going to fill in blanks here, and it very likely could be some sort of binding vow from Yuta. Next up, Asher wants to know what my thoughts are on Charles's rib, because unless Yuta used his technique earlier and I didn't notice, it suggests that he will be returning and using that technique at some point. And yeah, Yuta actually did use Charles's technique in chapter 250 during the domain expansion. So I think the mention of the rib here was just explaining how Yuta had access to it. And then you say, if Uraume won against Akari, what are the chances that they're going on a killing spree against the remaining sorcerers in order to set up the merger? And I don't think Gege would like cut back to Uraume, who has destroyed Hikari and suddenly destroyed other people as well. And if we don't get it in sort of like, hey, this happened and we're just letting you know, I don't think 4 chapters is enough to like show Uraume dealing with all of those people. But if we do get the merger, then yeah, that's a good point, because everyone needs to be dead, and they're clearly not going to be unless something insane happens. Next up, we got this question from Isaac, who says, I've been rewatching season 2, and I noticed that when Gojo was in the prison realm, he had all access to his cursed energy cut off. So wasn't it possible for Kenjaku or Mahito to just kill him in that moment when he was helpless? And I'll say, maybe. We don't know how the prison realm works. It's at least possible that if Kenjaku or whoever had like interfered with Gojo in that moment, then the prison realm's process would have been interrupted and Gojo would have had access to everything again and, you know, could have handled them easily. But let's assume Gojo had to remain helpless. We know that Kenjaku didn't want to kill him. So even if he could, that's why he didn't, because in the past he had killed Six Eyes users and they had just kind of reappeared. So by trapping Gojo, he knew that no other Six Eyes user would like manifest or be born. Next up, we got OG Ghosty, who says, could soul damage destroy Sukuna's essence inside the finger without actually destroying the finger? And this is interesting because we just saw Sukuna get damaged through the finger, even though the finger is invulnerable. But I still don't think you could destroy Sukuna's essence within a finger, because I do believe that would also apply to the invulnerability of the binding vows at play. So while what Nobara did was possible, I don't think Nobara could have specifically just killed the Sukuna within a finger. Next up, we have a little follow-up from Nikki here on the whole one will live or one will die thing, where they share their thoughts that they think it's either going to be Gojo or Yuji as the one who dies. And that's my best guess as well. I think Yuji makes the most sense given the whole direction of the story, but Gojo would also make sense if he just remains dead, and that's kind of a happier ending where all of the students get to live. But yeah, even if they defeat Sukuna right now, the fingers still exist. Sukuna still exists in his sealed form. So if they want to get rid of him completely, then a vessel needs to be killed while they have the fingers in them, right? Which has been Yuji's whole purpose. So I do still really think we could see this manga ending with a self-sacrifice from Yuji. But to your point about Gojo being the one to pull the trigger, if so, I have a harder time seeing that, because even if he comes back and has these new revelations about life, I still just cannot see him just killing one of his students, but we'll have to see. Next up, we got another longer one from Ray, so y'all pause to read it, but it largely deals with what the purpose of Yuta taking over Gojo's body was. And I think for the most part, it is those kind of narrative reasons that you talk about, showing how like Yuta becoming the monster wasn't going to be successful, and that kind of like the wrong lessons had been learned there, even from Gojo himself, which we learned in those chapters, right? That he was trying to catch up to Geto and become the full monster himself in order to defeat Sukuna. So I think there's a lot of narrative and thematic reasons there, but mechanically, I would say that it serves to kind of get rid of Sukuna's domain expansion once again. Because before he showed up, Todo and Yuji were going in, but remember, Sukuna was about to cast his domain, and they probably were going to be cooked at that point. But Yuta Gojo showed up, domain clashed, and basically put Sukuna's domain back on burnout, which leads us to where we are now in the fight, where he just took the risky move of using RCT to destroy his brain and bring it back to try and fight Yuji. But clearly we've seen how that's gone now. So I don't know if there was any more of a reason beyond that, just than the thematic reasons. But let me add that I do still think we will get something more with Yuta in these final 4 chapters. Now, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily be anything like revolutionary that then connects all of these further dots in the background, but it's not completely over whatever's happening with that. Next up, we've got another longer one here from Alex, so y'all pause, but he is providing his 2 cents on the only one will die ending, saying he thinks it makes sense for Gojo to die. And yeah, I agree that this would make a lot of sense if Gojo was the one to die. Like I said, I think it would be the happiest ending, not for Gojo, obviously, but for the manga as a whole, that the students get to live. And it would be very poetic, because his whole thing was to raise up the next generation and rebuild Jujutsu Society, and through his sacrifice and everything he did, he basically would have been successful in that. And so by him dying, he got to save the next generation. So I think this would be a beautiful ending, but I do think there are still possibilities for other ones. And then next up, we've got this from Phantom, who says that he and his friend are having a big argument about Yuta. Does Rika count as a curse technique for Yuta? And yes, it's explicitly listed as his curse technique in the fan book. So Gege listed Yuta's curse technique as Rika, and especially ever since the true Rika from Jujutsu Kaisen 0 left, this Rika that remains is largely representative of Yuji's curse technique. He wouldn't be able to copy, at least not in the same way, without Rika. So I do think in any theoretical matchups with Yuta, you of course have to include Rika. She's a fundamental part of his toolkit, and I think the Six Eyes comparison is a very good one in that regard. So yeah, I'm definitely on your side in this. And then next up, we've got this theory from David, who says that Megumi has repeatedly tried to sacrifice himself by summoning Maharaga. That plotline may have ended in Shibuya, or Gege is setting us up for him to do it one last time. And I'm totally with you that this is a possibility. Now, whether it involves Maharaga or not, I don't know, but I think a big self-sacrifice play from Megumi is certainly one of the possibilities we are staring down the barrel of, especially in reference to all of the themes with Megumi leading up to this, including Gojo saying, you know, there's a difference between winning by dying and winning even if you die. So I certainly think the one that dies could be Megumi, but I'm also with you that Yuji and or Gojo could ultimately save him, and it might be one of those two that die instead. Next up, we got this from Isaiah, who says, no sorcerer could fill the shoes of Gojo except Yuji. And I agree and disagree here, which I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think what you meant by that statement, because yes, Yuji is going to be the one to step up and defeat Sukuna in this moment, but obviously he's had a lot of help. So I think that he has transcended Gojo in the ways that Gojo wished for his students to transcend him, but Yuji is obviously not Gojo, and in a one-on-one, he's not beating Gojo in that way, which I don't think that's what you meant, but I needed to say that before people yelled at me in the comments. Next up, got this insane donation from Darth. Thank you so much for the support, man. And he wants to know, shouldn't Sukuna have a supreme art, a maximum technique? And yes, he should, insofar as he is the pinnacle of jujutsu, and so if having a maximum technique is just a matter of mastering your technique, then you would think he'd have one. But I think this is largely just a more meta kind of thing, where Gege just moved away from having ultimate techniques, or maximum techniques, excuse me, because we've only seen 3 in the entire series. So I don't think it's a matter of Sukuna having not figured that out or been able to master it. It's just simply that his technique doesn't have a maximum like most of the techniques in the series. So yeah, I think it's again a product of Jujutsu Kaisen 0 coming before JJK and domain expansions not existing in JJK 0, perhaps Gege was going to make maximum techniques the pinnacle of jujutsu, but then decided to do domains instead. Next up, Daniel wants to know if Rika ate Inumaki's arm, and if so, what about Shibuya? And I'm glad you asked this because I know a lot of people have been confused about this. So, yes, I believe that Rika did eat Inumaki's arm, but you are correct that he lost the arm in Shibuya. So, I think they collected that arm, like they found where his arm was severed. He probably picked it up and took it with him. And then after it couldn't be healed, just made the best of a bad situation and let Rika eat it so that Yuta could copy the technique. Next up, John says, could divine sentencing's confiscation get rid of Sukuna's fingers? And this is a fascinating question that I never thought about. So here's what I'll say. Probably not, just because I think the language cursed tool was used when Kamutoke got confiscated, and the fingers are just cursed objects, not really cursed tools. And also, the fingers technically existed within Sukuna, aka Megumi, in that moment as well. So it theoretically could have taken the fingers instead of Kamutoke if they were an option. But if somebody were just sitting in the domain holding a finger as opposed to like having consumed one, maybe it would get taken, but I would lean no. Next up, we got this one from Anthony, who says, how many black flashes for Miwa to reach Sukuna's level? And I'm assuming you just had a typo here, because I think you meant to say how many black flashes would Sukuna have to hit to reach Miwa's level, because Miwa wouldn't have to hit any. She's already the pinnacle of the verse. Next up, Jojo asked me who I think wins between Todo and Toji, and Jojo personally said that they think Todo extreme diffs because he can steal Toji's worm and tools with his swaps, and also Todo has overall superior stats, stronger, faster, and arguably more durable. So this is really interesting, and I agree with you that it's extreme difficulty either way, because I'm assuming we're taking current Todo, like Vibra Slap, 50 swaps a second Todo, because otherwise I don't think like previous Todo could beat Toji, but current Todo, extreme diff, I do think he could beat Toji. Well, they both have T names, Toji. But I don't know if I would argue that he's stronger, faster, and more durable. I feel like you're undervaluing the heavenly restriction a little bit there. I think his advantage is the technique and his IQ. So I do think Todo could get the win, especially because Toji would just have hand-to-hand to try to beat him. So I think I would ultimately agree that Todo by extreme diff, but I guess it's even closer than you think. And finally for this video, we've got this question from Jensen, and y'all pause to read it, but it deals with how Gege potentially lied about Nobara in order to set up for this reveal, because at the JJK pop-up exhibition, he answered a question that he talked about how he had plotted Nobara's departure from the story, and that verbiage is important there, all the way back before the arc. So back when that interview Q&A first came out, everybody was treating that as confirmation that Nobara was truly gone. So no, I don't think Gege was lying, because he did use the word depart and not death, so he was being kind of cheeky in retrospect, I believe. But also, even if he had just straight up said in that interview, yeah, I planned Nobara's death back at this point, I think that's just like a way an author would need to talk about their ongoing work, because he's not just going to spoil a huge reveal like that, right? If the large intent from the pieces you've set up are that Nobara is gone, then you're going to answer questions in that respect, again, in order to not spoil yourself, right? But also, I do think there's at least an argument to be made here based on what you're saying, that she technically was dead, at least for a period of time, but then through Nita's technique and whatever else they did, were able to resuscitate her or bring her back. So in any case, I guess bottom line is just, I don't think Gege was being like malicious or, you know, had changed his mind or anything like that. I think he was just most likely being cheeky in that interview. And y'all, that's going to do it for this one. And thank you so much for all of the questions and support. Like, it truly does blow me away every time that with a fresh chapter, we've got fresh questions that people actually like enjoy hearing me yap about. So thank you guys so much. I don't take it for granted, and I've enjoyed this JJK journey together so much. And I'm probably going to get more sentimental as we get closer to the end, but I just wanted to let you all know how much I appreciate you. And thank you so much for watching these videos.